Hi everyone. I apologize it's taken me so long to follow up. It's been a few days since I first told you about Paula, and I've been meaning to update you as quickly as possible. It's my fault. I've been feeling worse since Paula came back. I'm not sure how to explain it, except that it feels like I just chugged 6 Monster Energies. I'm tired, yet weirdly energized. I feel disconnected, unplugged, undrained. Like if I'm not careful, I'll drift away in a second. Maybe this has something to do with the Xanax prescription I've had since I was 6 years old. Whatever it is, it's only gotten worse. Because of this, I developed a habit of taking meticulous notes, writing in journals, voice recorders, filming myself. I became obsessed with tracking every second of my day. From those notes, I'd compile those notes into an all-encompassing story that I'd then record online for my benefit. Now, I'm going to be posting it on Reddit for you all. Also, thank you to whoever suggested setting up a camera to film my room. The footage that I captured was utterly horrifying. I told myself I had to wait till dark to run, then I'd make a break for it. In the back of my closet was an old motion-activated trail camera that my parents and I used to use while hunting. Also back there was an enormous flashlight and an emergency collapsible ladder. Perks of having parents that were practically doomsday preppers. It's been almost 10 hours since I'd stormed upstairs after the conversation I'd had with my parents. We'd both said some cruel and hurtful things to each other, and I'd half expected them to storm up after me. I wouldn't have wanted to talk, but I would have appreciated them. Olive branch, the fucking gesture. But no, they had left about 2 hours ago, around 10 o'clock. Their white Escalade roared as it started up, and I listened as it slowly faded away to nothing. It's midnight now, and they haven't come back yet. Ding, ding, ding. Shit, Arjun, I mumbled. Fuck. The chimes sounded loud in the tomb-like silence of my room. I quickly silenced my phone as my heart stopped, and I held my breath and I watched as the shadows paused underneath my door. Re-eyeing. Shuffle. She was still out there. My hands were shaking and I forced them to be still as I delicately propped the camera against a stack of books. I adjusted it slightly. There. If anything happened, if anything came through that door, it would go straight to my phone. I saw my phone light up again, this time silently. It was Arjun, my friend. Arjun was a childhood friend of mine and lived in his parents' rental property about 15 minutes from my parents' house. We'd grown up together, we did everything together, we'd even lived on the same street since kindergarten. He was the Thelma to my Louise, the peanut butter to my jelly, even after every kill, so he didn't question why I needed a ride. And he didn't question why I needed him to park in the alley behind my house. I hoisted the emergency fire ladder up and threw it over the windowsill. It clattered loudly to the ground, and I winced as it almost hit the windshield of Arjun's beloved dark red Pontiac. The cool, crisp October air rushed in, and my fingers froze as I braced myself against the frame of my window. My stomach dropped as I looked down, but before I could take a step further, suddenly I heard a noise behind me. WRRRRRRRRRRRT. WRRRRRRRT. My blood ran cold. I'd recognize that fucking sound anywhere. The camera. I whipped my head around, the giant blue duffel bag blocking my view. I strained to see around it, twisting my neck to look past it. It blocked my view, but I could still see as Paula, or whatever it was, slowly started to slide their hand underneath my bedroom door. Hand on Bible, I've never moved so fast before in my life. Paula's hand was sliding under the door. I was standing in front of my bedroom door, and I could see myself in the full-length mirror that was attached to the back. My skin was pale, drained of any color. My brown, curly hair was wild, and my dark green eyes were wide and scared. I was trying to move, but my legs felt like they were glued to the carpet. I tried to move. I could see Paula's fingers inching closer, closer to me. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. Help me, I wanted to scream. Help me, help me, help. Amy, huh? I snapped back to reality. Arjun was standing in the doorway of his kitchen, a coffee in hand and his pug Milo strapped to his chest in a baby Bjorn carrier. Sorry, rough night. Yeah, I figured. He bustled into the kitchen. His blue robe flapped as he pulled out the toaster and slammed it on the counter. His black hair was slicked back, his tan skin looked moisturized, and he looked surprisingly coiffed for it being 7:30 in the morning. So, wanna tell me what the fuck is going on? I swallowed uneasily. I tucked away the small black book I was scribbling in. What do you mean? He threw me an intensely condescending look. Milo, the pug, had the audacity to copy it. How long have we been friends? 17 years. And you don't think I can't read you like an open book? You're welcome to stay, but I need more information. For example, I didn't know you were back. Why aren't you at your apartment? What's happening with college? He brought over a plate of toast, setting it just out of reach. You get toast after you talk. Something inside me broke. Everything I'd been holding back from last night, hell from this last month, came rushing out of me like a flood. My head fell to my hands, and sobs violently shook my entire body. Monroe, Arjun's gorgeous pitch-black husky, came trotting over and put her head on my knee. She whimpered softly, "Whoa, Amy." Paula came back. Arjun's face froze. "You're joking. Is this a sick joke?" His face was like stone. Paula, the older sister who disappeared when we were 6. My face was beet red and a mess of snot streams and wet tears. Ranger found her at a campsite in Yosemite. She was at the hospital for about a week before my parents took her home. I think my parents and the cops are keeping it quiet because nobody knows. She's been at my house with me. I hiccuped. But things, fuck, Arjun. Sobs ripped apart my chest. I tried to steady myself, placing both palms on the cool kitchen table. Fuck, things have been weird since she got back. Arjun went extremely still. He was looking at me oddly too, like he knew something I didn't. Weird. How? I can't explain. I pulled my phone from my pocket. Please just watch this. The timestamp on the video reads 3:01 a.m. The screen flickers once, then twice, then finally settles. It's pitch black, and it's hard to figure out what we're looking at, but I knew. It's the feed from the trail camera I left behind on my bedroom floor. Amy, okay, I'm confused, Arjun said, exasperated. What are we watching? SHHH, I said softly. Just watch. 3:02 a.m. Movement. The door is shaking. Violently. For at least 30 seconds, the door is practically rattling off its hinges. Fortunately, there's no sound in the video. Then suddenly, it stops. Nothing. No movement. The camera flicks off. A half second later, the camera flicks back on. There's something trying to slide underneath the door. It's so dark, so it's difficult to see what it is, but then the camera focuses. It's a hand. Paul is trying to slide her hand back underneath the door. Paul is crouching on the ground, trying to slide her hand under. Her hand is facing down, and it stops hard at her wrist. She can't get any further in, but then it doesn't stop. Her hands stretches into my room. Her wrist is almost a foot long now, stretched unnaturally thin. Her fingers, bent like spiders, are pulling themselves along the baseboards as if searching for something. She starts stretching upwards. Her hand stretches out of frame, but I know what she's reaching for. The door suddenly swings open, and her emaciated, unnaturally thin arm retracts like a tongue back into the snake's mouth. Nothing. 30 seconds pass. The hallway is as dark as my room. Then suddenly, there she is. She's crouched down, walking on all fours. Her arms and legs are bent unnaturally, pushing her belly against the floor. She's moving slowly, as if in pain. I can't figure out why, until the camera focuses on her closer. She's creeping in on her fingertips. Suddenly, she notices the camera. Her eyes, glowing white, focus on the red recording light. She reaches out. The camera falls, and the screen goes black. The silence was suffocating. I was watching Arjun's face, but it was unreadable. Like stone. Worse than stone. Like a dam, its concrete face holding back a torrent of emotion. Finally, he spoke. What in the everlasting fuck was that? Amy. I held back a sob. I left a trail camera in my room before I left with you. It's activated by motion. I wanted to see if Paula, well, whatever that is, if she would. Arjun held up his hand. I could see his fingers. They were trembling. You're telling me. He pointed to the black iPhone screen. That's Paula. I hesitated for a moment, trying to read his face. He thinks I'm crazy. I thought to myself. He's seen me at my worst, coming off a blackout, lying in my puke in a bathtub. He doesn't believe me. but I steadied myself. "Yes, Arjun," I said softly. "That's Paula." His face was completely blank. He'd always been unreadable like that, even when we were kids. Out of our little group of friends, Arjun had always had the best poker face, but we always joked that when his face got blank, it meant he was figuring out something, that he knew something we didn't. So, Arjun finally said, softly, "There's something I need to show you." In the basement, Arjun lived in one half of a duplex at the edge of town. He had 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms all to himself, and it was great. It was actually owned by his parents who, for years, used to do long-term rentals with tourists who wanted to stay close to Yosemite National Park for the summer. But they stopped when Arjun started high school, and he moved in instead. He'd lived here on and off since then, even deciding to stay after graduation, and instead chose to commute to his classes at the nearby Columbia College. We used to throw some righteous parties here. Down here, we walked down the staircase to the basement. There were pictures of us lining the walls. Me, Arjun, Mikey, Louise. My heart twanged uncomfortably. Next to Louise was her best friend from softball, Patris, and next to Patris was Jack. I looked down. It was still hard looking at him, even these few years later. There were so many pictures of us. There we were playing Little League T, playing Red Rover in the park, building our treehouse in the forbidden part of the forest behind Louise's house, getting milkshakes at Lucky D's Diner. There was me, in my emo phase, with a face full of smeared makeup and head full of ratty hair extensions, and there was Louise winning medal after medal in softball. I frowned. These were from high school. Where was I? Oh yes, I was high. "Hey Amy, focus. You zoned out again." I snapped back. The door to the basement was padlocked. Arjun looked deadly serious. "There's something I need to tell you," he whispered, "but you have to promise me that you won't tell a soul what I'm about to show you." My body felt cold. "Of course, I promise," I whispered. "I promise, on Paula." He watched me for a second, his dark eyes searching mine, then nodded. With a soft clank, the padlock opened and he flipped on the lights. First thing I noticed was an enormous corkboard filling almost the entire back wall. It was filled with photographs, newspaper clippings, and large slips of paper with dates on them. 1962, 1977, 1992. Then 2007, read the slips of paper, and below was crammed with newspaper clippings and printouts from the internet. Alien spaceship takes another. Finally, evidence of Bigfoot. Jamestown halfway house reports another missing. The clippings screamed at me. Large photographs of men, women, and kids were also stuffed into the crowded space. They looked like pictures pulled from yearbooks, mugshots, and random Facebook pages. Bits of red yarn were strung between the photographs and dates, and there, right in the center of the board, were 10 large photographs. They were labeled with a large, blocky handwriting. Missy Pulte, Dana Teppan, Mary Sanders, Kristen Poltansky, Daphne Tides. I trailed off. Paula Richards. Arjun, I breathed, turning to him. "You're looking for the missing girls." "Not missing," he said grimly, his bright smile gone. "Gone? Dead?" I felt sick. Arjun pointed at the board. In 2007, 10 girls went missing in Grovefield over the course of the last week in October. At first, there was nothing. No outrage, no police response, no, nothing. Grovefield, or Gravefield, I should say, covered it up. The longer Arjun talked, the more murderous he looked. I looked into it. The 5 girls that disappeared first. Kristen Poltansky, for example. He pointed to a mugshot of a small, smarmy girl with dishwater blonde hair. Burnouts, Kristen especially, constantly in and out of rehab. She was 15 years old and a drug addict, living on the street. Still, to this day, the police haven't filed a missing persons report for her. I frowned. "So, what makes you think she's missing?" "Maybe she's just run away." But he was shaking his head. "I talked to what's left of Kristen's family. They haven't spoken to her in years." He looked over at me. The bare light bulbs above threw his face in sharp relief. 15 years, to be exact. I was trying to wrap my head around it. The faces in the photographs staring down at me, the overwhelming amount of internet printouts of conspiracy theories, and reports of missing persons reported from inside Yosemite National Park. It was starting to make my head swim. Finally, I had to ask, So, I know the story. I know the conspiracy theories, the rumors about that week. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt sticky. But how does Paula fit into this? Her name left a bitter taste in my mouth. And fuck Daphne, Louise's sister. Daphne wasn't a burnout, and neither was Paula. Arjun didn't even notice my discomfort. He was too wrapped up into what he was looking at. Kristen, Missy, Dana, Mary, and Ali Dandel all disappeared on the same day, the Monday of the last week in October. He paused. It was so quiet, you could have heard a pin drop. Milo suddenly sneezed, scaring us. Then on Wednesday, Daphne and 3 of her best friends disappear. They were having a sleepover at Daphne's house. The next morning, gone, vanished in the middle of the night. He turned to me. I could feel him looking at me. Then Paula disappeared. She was last. On that Friday of the last week of October, my heart was thudding uncomfortably. I felt hot and dizzy, and I could feel tears beginning to burn in the corners of my eyes. Angrily, I wiped them away. I couldn't look at the board anymore. I looked away. There were big filing cabinets next to the corkboard with enormous binders stacked on top. 1962 to 2007 was written in big, bold, black letters on the binder at the very top. I felt sick. Who do you think you are, not telling me about this sooner? My stomach, coated with thick layers of grime and bile from the past 15 years, felt ready to explode. Why the fuck didn't you tell me about this earlier? Arjun seemed taken aback by the violence in my words. Amy, his face twisted. I'm sorry, I didn't. This is my sister you're investigating. My voice cracked. I jabbed my finger hard into his shoulder. My life. And you didn't think to tell me about this. I shoved my fists into the pockets of my sweatpants. I was afraid that if I didn't, I would use those fists on him instead. You're just like everyone else who gawked and laughed and looked at my life like some morbid roadside attraction. Who the fuck do you think you are? I could feel myself shaking like a leaf, and I turned to go. But Arjun blocked the door. This wasn't my intention. Amy, I love you. You know that. He grabbed my shoulders. I couldn't move. Arjun was a big dude. He towered over all the other kids, even the ones on his basketball team. Ever since this tragedy occurred to you and to Louise, I never stopped thinking about it. Not once. Never stopped wondering about it. And it wasn't until last year, when all my courses were moved online, did I even have the time to start looking into it. And now with this, he gestured to my phone. I think I finally have proof that there's something going on. His eyes burned deep into mine. We have proof. I pulled away and wiped my eyes. Have you mentioned this tea? But Arjun didn't even let me finish. He scoffed loudly, the noise scaring Milo. Mention it. Do you remember the police's reaction to your dad? And to everyone else that tried to look into it? He had Monroe's right ear between his thumb and forefinger and was absent-mindedly rubbing it. A nervous habit back from when we were kids. No way. I even tried talking about this with Louise once, and she shut me down. Hard. She kept insisting that Daphne was alive. Wouldn't hear another word otherwise. Kicked me out of her house. Wait, she said what? I blurted out, accusingly. What else did she say? She said Arjun started, then glanced at me sideways. Damn, you guys still don't talk, do you? What did she say? Arjun, that Daphne is alive. He smacked his lips hard on the last word. Because according to Louise, Daphne has been sending her letters for the past 6 years. I felt my heart freeze, and for the first time since Paula came back, I felt the tiniest flutter of hope. Holy crap, Arjun, we need to see those letters. Yeah, no kidding. But I doubt she'll let us. But Arjun suddenly froze. He was silent for a moment, then held up a finger. Do you hear that? I held my breath. It was silent. The HVAC suddenly kicked on and started humming loudly. Hear what? SHH. Arjun whispered, listening intently. Thud, thud. My heart was beginning to pound. He looked at me, his dark eyes wide. Amy, he asked, slowly, does anyone know you're here? No, I didn't tell any. Then suddenly I heard it. The crunching of tires on gravel. Arjun looked at me. The basement was suddenly suffocating. We need to go. Now. He grabbed Monroe's collar and rushed for the door. He threw it open and bolted up the stairs. Adrenaline coursing through my veins, I took one last look at the corkboard. Paula's face stared down at me, her eyes burning through the photographs. "I'm so sorry, Paula. Please forgive me." In my desperation, I grabbed the 2 binders at the very top of the filing cabinets. They were excruciatingly heavy. "Amy, let's go." I rushed upstairs. Arjun was standing at the top of the staircase, peeking around the hallway. He was looking at something. He had 2 large duffel bags with him, my dark blue one that I hadn't even unpacked, and a bright green one. Monroe was clipped into her harness, and Milo was still strapped into the baby Jordan. Monroe was barking furiously at the front door. Her thick, black hair stood on end. I gasped. There were 4 enormous black SUVs racing up the gravel road to Arjun's duplex. Dirt and dust were kicked up, ballooning into an enormous cloud that was racing straight towards us. "Arjun," I whispered, "we need to leave. We need to go. What are we gonna do?" My car is parked behind us. His face was white, ashy. "We gotta make a break for it. There's a back way to the main road out of town, if we can just..." 2 things suddenly happened at once. The front bay window, with its gorgeous inlay of green and blue stained glass, suddenly exploded. Then Arjun, covered in blue and green shards, fell to the ground screaming. His right leg was shattered and I could see bones sticking out through his shin. Monroe then started losing it. She started charging at the front door, pulling Arjun along in the process. "No, Monroe." Without thinking, I grabbed Arjun and hoisted him up. He was crying, tears running down his face, and I pulled his arm over my shoulder. Slipping on the broken glass, I half yanked, half shoved all 4 of us to the back door. Monroe was barking furiously, with foam literally dripping from her mouth. I kicked open the back door. "There." "Keys, Arjun," I screamed, but he wasn't paying attention to me. I could hear the SUV's brakes screaming as they squealed to a stop. I tried the car door. Thank God it was unlocked. I threw the duffel bags into the back seat and threw Arjun in after. "Arjun, the keys. Give me the keys. I need to get you to a hospital." But he wasn't listening to me. I threw myself into the back seat and desperately tried searching his pockets. "Is Milo okay?" Arjun was bleeding everywhere. "Is my baby okay? Is Milo okay?" Oh God, he was out of his mind and I could tell I was losing him. I sat up and slapped him. "He's fine," I yelled. "Where did you put the keys?" Suddenly, there was an explosion of glass. The passenger side window exploded, with glass and metal flying everywhere. I threw up my arm but was too late, as shards sliced deeply into my face. And Monroe lost her mind, her eyes shining a bright white, foam dripping from her lips and her black fur standing on end. She started throwing herself at the door. Arjun, sobbing, tried to hold her back. There, my heart stopped. I held up the keys. "Got you." With a deafening roar, the Pontiac howled to life. I whipped the car around, grinding the tires into the asphalt. An overwhelming smell of burning rubber flooded through the broken window. The back road from Arjun's duplex cut through a dense thicket of forestry that separated his isolated complex from the rest of the town. You had to take a sharp right into the forest, and that led straight through to the downtown area. The road was bumpy and full of treacherously deep potholes, but I knew we'd be safe if we managed to make it into the thick vegetation. "He's gonna die in the backseat," I thought to myself. I couldn't catch my breath. I could feel myself on the very edge of a massive panic attack. First Paula, now him. I can't let him die. I won't let this happen again. "Stay with me, Arjun." I glanced back at him. He looked pale. "You'll be okay, buddy. Hang in there, buddy. You'll be okay. I love you, but shut up, Amy." Arjun grunted, spitting up glass. "No hospitals. Take me to Jack." I was flabbergasted. "Arjun, you've got a fucking bone sticking out. Jack and his Boy Scout first aid skills aren't going to help you. GODDAMNIT, no hospitals." Arjun screamed. "Go to Jack's. He's staying at his dad's house." "Okay, fine," I yelled back. "Fine," I said again, quieter. "But only because you're dying, Arjun. Only reason I'm going to my ex's house." We were about to take the turn away from Arjun's duplex and I glanced quickly one last time in the rearview mirror to make sure we weren't being followed. A flash of bright white caught my eye. A man, dressed in an all-white suit, was standing at the back door. He was pale, even paler than I, and his blonde hair was slicked straight back. On his right wrist was a thick, black bracelet like the ones we used to purchase from Hot Topic. The asshole was waving goodbye. I flipped him off. I flipped him off. I flipped him off.